Welcome to the bottom line. My name is Benjamin Poole here with
Drew Dosek.
All right, so the markets this week have been a little kind of all over the place, right? So we didn't have these huge moves, these huge rallies, but the market has been floating all week.
Yep, we've been looking at nearly 7 to 9 days straight of upward movement. Not a lot of volume, but this is really important to analyze when we look at the charts.
Yeah, that's right, because we had we had the S&P 500 do some crazy things. We had the NASDAQ 100 do some crazy things. And then since the lows of August 5th, we've had Nvidia up 36, 38%, and it still looks like it wants to go higher. So
Yeah.
Drew, you're going to show us some charts on the SPY, right?
Let's jump into the spiders, guys. This is the big dog of them all, S&P 500. Here we go. All right. So what you see here, we've got simple trend line analysis that we're going to be doing today through all of my charts, just because I want to try to do everything I can to make trading easy and simple. So what I did, I took the daily chart of the S&P 500. We've got this long-term trend line that you can see. It's connected through these pivot points, as well as through all this chop right before we had that big August 5th sell-off. We also have this pivot high connecting over to these pivot points here, creating another trend line of support coming down. You can see price action had a hard time getting through this area. Once it did break through, if it's going to go back up, it should have hard time getting through that as well. But what happened 3 days ago, we closed right beneath this downsloping trend line and then opened up the next day, gapped above all of that resistance. When you gap above a lot of resistance, it gives the opportunity for that stock to continue moving forward with a lot of momentum. Think of it much like a bridge. Instead of getting across a river and fighting and using up all that energy, it doesn't have to. It simply can just jump right across it. And what did it do? It ran into this long-term trend line, and within the first 30 minutes of the day, price moved up. And as we see today, price has not come back down beneath that line. I'm going to be very interested to see where price closes today. That's going to show us a lot about what to expect for next week. If we have price closing above, we can probably anticipate some more movement up. But if we have it close in line, we're going to kick the can into the week next week to see what stock movements are going to happen. Ben, what do you got?
All right, so I think the camera was on me a little bit. So here we go, Apple. So we have this long-term trend line, kind of like the spiders. We've got this pivot low right here, this pivot right here, and it broke below here and consolidated. It tried to get back inside of that parallel channel, that upsloping trend line, and then it took this massive fall. So one thing that I'm really interested is the fact that it didn't really do anything at the 886. So 886 is a Fibonacci retracement level that's found in nature. That's usually a good resistance zone, right? So couple that with, you've got this pivot top right here and all this price action. It blew through that. And so now when price action going back up to this trend line, we're looking at the 786 and then the 886 levels. So you have that, and you've also got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days up in a row. That is an overextension in the price chart. Warren Buffett dumped some of them. He still has got a massive amount of Apple. However, man, as soon as this wedge, it comes to an end, it's going to either shoot right back up and make all-time highs, or it's going to start coming back down in, and I think it'll take out the $200 level. So the big resistance level that I'm looking for is right here at the 786, so 228.41. But ultimately, my upside target is 232.53. That is where I think you're going to get a lot of pullback, a lot of resistance, and then I think that'll be kind of help the catalyst for the SPY to start coming down as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting, especially with Warren Buffett having 400 million shares still,
400 million still
of Apple, even though he reduced it quite a bit. It's important to note he's still holding just as much as he does with Coca-Cola. So both of which have 400 million shares. It's almost looking like that could be a long-term hold for him. But anyway, jumping into this chart, very similar if you see the pattern. We've got the QQQs. It's going to be the NASDAQ. On the daily chart, we've got this long-term trend line as well. And look, price just came down into it right before August 5th. Paused, bounced back up, paused. Since then, fell down. And now we've had a 12% bounce on the QQQ. Very big move. As you can see here, what I described on the SPY, the same thing happened here on the Qs. We had price action move here, 3 days ago, actually in 4 days ago, price went up straight into the trend line, fell back down, came back the next day, attempted to come up, fell back down, and then all of a sudden jumped over that trend line and has proceeded to move up. Again, watching this chart very closely by the close of the day to give us some insight as to what to expect next week. All right, Ben, what do you got?
All right, so here's a chart of Nvidia, right? So kind of we're looking at the same type of a situation here. You had this upsloping trend line, you closed below. Now we're interested, we've got this pivot top right here. This is the all-time high, around $140 per share. You've had this huge drop, right? So August 5th, again, was the lows for Nvidia. Now, as you can see, it's rallied up over 37% in, 8 trading days? That's insane. So this is going to be very interesting. Once you get up to the 618 fib level, again, it's blowing through it like it doesn't even exist. So now my next target is this gap fill. So check this out. Let me go ahead and switch this over and then pause this. All right, so you got this gap fill right here at 126.37. Based on the fact that this was such a big fall that once it gets up into that level, you should see a pretty good pullback. Not only that, but you've got this pivot high right here, this pivot high, which creates this trend line. So it's right in this area. So just a little bit higher. And then my favorite is the 886, so 135.08. So I'm going to be starting to accumulate a little bit at 126, add a little bit at 130, and then 135.08. And I think that would be the max upside target, knowing that if it starts to break above 140 again, it could run into all-time highs. So we do have earnings on Nvidia coming out next Wednesday, which I'll be trading live with the members in my service. But these are some levels that we're watching for going into next week. These are going to be some pretty interesting levels.
Yeah, I love that downsloping trend line on Nvidia. Almost salivating, wanted to take the trade just looking at it. Hopefully price gets up into it quickly.
That's right.
Here we're going after another one of the third major indices. We've got the SMH. This chart's pretty similar to the Qs and spiders, but if you look at it closely, there's actually a very big difference. So as you see here connected on the daily charts, the trend lines through these low pivots. It's taken us through here, as we saw with the spiders and the Qs. They both had difficulties dropping beneath this trend line. When that trend line did break, what did we see? We saw price come down here on August 5th, and since it's had over a 20% bounce. But when it did bounce, it didn't gap up over this trend line. Instead, it opened beneath the trend line, went through it without any resistance. Maybe one 10-minute candle, paused, pulled back, but it went straight through. That's a very powerful move. You can see today's price action is still kind of staying in line. Again, SMH, the Qs, and the spiders, it's so very important to monitor these to help you understand what's going to happen in the market. Right here and today, we're about to find out really what's going to happen for next week. Coupled with Nvidia's earnings, this is really going to mean an awful lot. If we do start pulling back down and then Nvidia follows suit, it could have a chance of getting a bounce depending upon what earnings it has. But it all depends really on, I think, how today is going to close.
Yeah, one interesting thing is you can see that there's a little gap fill right here on the SMH as well. So it'll be interesting to see because, this is the semiconductors and Nvidia is the leading semiconductor. Right. So it'd be interesting to see if Nvidia gets up to its level and the SMH gets up into its level and see if we get a pullback there. And then ultimately you've got this red bar candle right here and then you've got this other gap fill, which is a pretty substantial gap fill on the SMH as well.
Right. There's two additional points to really consider. The volume today has been very light. Usually when we have lighter volume, that tells us institutions really aren't buying some of this move. So consider that, as well as the 22% move on the SMH just in 9 trading days. Spectacular move that doesn't happen very often in history. And usually we like to see very fast moves, which also create a very fast return and go in the opposite direction. All right, Ben, what other chart you got?
So I'm going to go over the Bitcoin chart just because Bitcoin has been doing a little bit different than the Nvidias and the SMHs and the SPY. So here's what I like to see about that I like to see on Bitcoin. So you had this big drop. This was on the 5th of August, same thing, right? You had this big scare, huge spike in the VIX. It was up 180% or something like that. Now it's since come back in, so that's the fear index. So you had Bitcoin drop, did a little consolidation. It looked like it was going to put in a bear flag, but then had this huge pop, this huge green bar candle. So now you're consolidating inside of this green bar candle, and this is creating kind of a pseudo bear flag, a bull flag. So for me, I get really interested at the bottom end of this green bar candle, because if you know anything about like time counts or inside bar patterns, this is setting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 days inside of this candle, which is actually a bullish signal. So you can pick this up here, and then you can expect another move up higher. So I'm really liking the chart of Bitcoin, although the other indices or the SPY and the other ones are looking overextended. This is giving you a really good pullback. And this is what you want to see. This gives you an idea that there's continuation going to happen. So I'm liking the chart of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's a nice mature pattern. It's like that coil is springing up and getting ready to kick off and move higher. Very neat.
Yeah, so yeah, like a coil, right?
Right.
I just kind of wanted to point this out. So I said that Nvidia and Apple didn't get pulled off of the 618. It didn't act as resistance, but look at Bitcoin. You took this high right here, this low right here, 618, that's where you're getting your pullback, right? So this is what I was expecting with the SPY and and Nvidia, but it's not doing that. Apple just pushing right through. So this is following a little bit better of chart patterns than any of the other charts are doing. So I'm liking this. So that gives me hope and promise that this is going to follow the technicals as well for an upside move.
Very nice analysis. Yeah. I like it. Good stuff. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, go into Intel. Intel, as you know, major chip producer here in the United States. This chart is not acting like the SMH. SMH, as I mentioned before, up over 22% in the last 9 trading days. But Intel has had terrible news. They're laying off about 20,000 employees, having to reduce costs to make sure that their bottom line looks better. But what does this chart look like in telling me? This is the Intel 10-minute chart, okay? So what I did after this major fall, and we fell down here and bounced up, then fell down some more, and I drew a trend line to create this level right here. I did the same here to show like there could be an area of support down at the bottom. But what happened just yesterday, we went up into this price, came back down, consolidated, almost kind of like the Bitcoin pattern that Ben was just describing, and then we made created a lot of energy and busted through the top of this trend line. Again, not a 22% move, but this is significant because price is still staying above this trend line. As long as price stays above this trend line, it has an opportunity to continue to go higher. Again, not a 22% move, but this is important for Intel. Now, a lot of investors that are maybe still stuck in this trade or are interested in the promise of future profits that are going to be generated with them being the major chip producer here in the United States. So it's something to consider. SMH is a leading indicator for the markets, so follow it closely along with the spiders and Qs, which basically conduct the market. But it's really important to pay attention to those 3 indices. That's why I brought them to your attention today. Look into what's going to happen next week so that we can start making new trades, make some more money.
That's right. All right, so that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for joining us. Keep in mind that this is for educational purposes only. Please do your own research. And
yeah, but it's great educational information. Yes,
it really is.
Yes, and together, hey,
there we go.
That's the bottom line.
Take care.